Hey guys, I'm Dave and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today, we're going to make a threshold. One of my friends has a house that is in need of repair. Okay, it probably needs to be torn down, but they had to change out one of the doorways, and in the process, they've opened up a gap in the flooring. To cover that, he asked me if I could build him a threshold. And this is the blank I'm starting with. And if we were going to keep the house for several years, I'd recommend oak or maple, something tougher. But they just want something to fill the gap until it's time to redo the house. So with that said, let's see if we can pull this one off.
This is my starting point. You can see that when they widened the doorway to install a new washing machine, they were left with the smallest of gaps in the flooring. Rather than try and repair those floorboards, we'll just cover everything with a nice wide threshold. I glued up some poplar for my blank to something like 9 inches wide and 32 inches long. I know this is the wrong material for this, but they wanted whatever I had on hand. After a couple of passes on my flattening sled, I pulled the board off the sled, flipped it over, and cleaned up the opposite face. At the table saw, I cleaned up one edge, reset my fence, and then cut the blank to a finished width of 7 inches. At the miter saw, I trimmed both ends, but left the blank a little long for now. I'll make the final cut later during the installation. Normally I would cut a rabbet on the underside of the threshold, but after marking the location where the wood needs to be full depth, that left me with nearly a 6-inch rabbet. It's time for plan B. I milled the main portion of the threshold to 1/2 inch thick and took the cutoff from before and milled that down to 3/8 of an inch. That's the difference between the height of the two floors. I drew a line on my 1/2 inch stock about 1 inch in and glued and pinned the 3/8 inch spacer in place. I added a few clamps and set it aside to dry. I reset my table saw for a 7-inch rip and removed the excess spacer strip. After playing around with the bevel gauge looking for just the right angle, I set my saw blade at 20 degrees. After a few test cuts, the fence was set to leave me a small flat edge on the thin side, and then I ripped off that corner. I raised the blade for a second wider cut and trimmed that corner off as well. This left me with the basic shape I was after, but it wasn't quite right. I put a 1/4 inch roundover bit in my router table and ran the wider of the two angles first. I kept the angle on the table and this eased that lower edge. The second angled side was a bit trickier since it has a smaller face, but I got through it okay. The goal is to remove any sharp edges that someone could step on. These roundovers are subtle, but they feel nice. I sanded the entire threshold with 120 grit paper on my random over sander. I started with the flats first, cleaning up any saw or planer marks. Then I used my sander to ease the edges between the angles and the flat top. I also smoothed out the roundovers as well. Again, I was just getting the profile smooth to the touch, or the foot as the case may be. Then I flipped the threshold around and repeated that process on the other side. With everything sanded, I think I've got the profile where I want it. Poplar is pretty boring on its own, so I decided to add a bit of stain. It won't match the floor exactly, but it does give the wood a warmer look. And because I use an oil stain and a latex urethane, I let that sit overnight to thoroughly dry before moving forward. I've had issues once or twice with mixing in oil stain and water-based urethane. The next step in the finishing process is to wipe everything down with denatured alcohol to remove any residual oil on the surface. I gave that a few minutes to dry and then gave the threshold a coat of urethane. I'd normally spray this, but I've got another job going and my gun is currently set up for paint. Since the underside will never be seen, I don't mind flipping it over and setting it on painter's points and coating both sides at once. When the urethane had ample time to dry, I added 2 more coats, sanding with 220 grit paper in between. To start the installation, I removed the old transition strip and had to trim back some of the door jamb. I marked the height of the top and cut that away with my oscillating saw. I hoped I could get away with just cutting the doorstop, but to get a cleaner fit, I had to cut away the bottom of the jamb as well. I cleaned up the excess with a chisel and mallet, and after cutting the threshold to length, I tried the fit again. Once I get the fit just right, I laid down some silicone caulk and tapped the threshold into place. Construction adhesive might hold better, but I find it to be messy. Besides, this fit is so snug I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Mechanical fasteners could also be used as well, but this floor is built on a concrete slab, and I didn't want to deal with a hammer drill, special fasteners, and all that. One more bead of silicone along both the outer edges, and the threshold is secured in place. At least until the house is remodeled. After cutting the tip off a new tube of caulk, I ran a bead on both sides of the door jamb to clean up the edges. It only takes a few minutes and some clean fingers to get nice looking joints. When I stained the transition, I just grabbed a color that was on my shelf. It's not a bad match to the hall floor. The threshold fills the entire doorway and covers that gap in the flooring nicely. Sure, that tile is cracked, but like I said, this house needs a lot of work and I was asked to just fix this one thing for now.
While I would have preferred to use a different material, I still think this threshold came out great. And while it may be a temporary fix, it looks much better than before I started. And all in, I probably have 2 or 3 hours in this, including the installation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Is it something I could have done easier, safer, smarter? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear. As usual, I'll add some links to the tools and equipment I use in this video, along with some of the stuff that I use here in the shop on a daily basis. Should you happen to need one of those things and purchase it through those links, it does help keep this channel going. If you enjoyed this video, maybe give us a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button and a little bell so you get notified each time I put out a new video. As usual, I don't have a clue what's coming up next, but it should be something interesting. So until then, have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.